right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. My name is Mike Zaramba, and as always, we're podcasting here out of Float House at 70 West Cordova Street. And to my right, your audio left. That doesn't even make sense because we're in stereo, but I got Andy with me.
Hello. It's good to be back. So what's going on for you in your life lately?
Man, I have been just on a little bit of a work binge, basically. I've been kind of, I went through that personal development seminar this past weekend, 30 hours of...
intense introspection.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So that was amazing, actually. Really, really powerful stuff. Kind of highlights some belief systems that, you can kind of unconsciously just not even be aware of, really.
So true. Yeah, that work. I'm doing a 90-day course with them right now. So it's intense.
Yeah.
However,
so that's what's going on.
However, it's only as intense as I make it. It's all about me.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, it's all about what kind of energy I'm bringing into it, any kind of stress I might be creating about stories I'm making up around this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it is making me really busy. I'm really busy because of it, all by choice. So I can't complain, or I shouldn't complain about that. Anyways,
no, that would be.
Yeah, because I'm doing it. So
alignment.
It's but just, then the only thing is my schedule is so crazy right now. I'm all over the place. It's just like I'm forgetting appointments. I'm forgetting to send emails, and it's just like, man, it's like too much. Yeah. Luckily, it's only a 90-day course, so I'm about a third in now. So
well, we'll get through it.
Oh yeah. Anyways,
and then we went into the river. Finally, I went back into the river. We go into the Seymour River pretty year-round. Well, we do. We go in year-round, but I haven't been in since I got back from Peru, which was in November. And, I've been kind of neglecting it. I haven't seen my
Well,
my
the river
mother,
god was angry at you. That's why you suffered when you came back.
Well, but the beauty of it was, I went in there and, didn't run in, didn't run out, just go to the knees, acclimate, breathe. Go to the neck, acclimate, breathe.
And I was having this discussion beforehand with our guest. I'm not going to give it away yet because it's a big surprise, and I'm excited to have him back. Some of the feedback we got on that post that we put up, right? And we had a lot of judgment. There was a lot of judgment going on around our facial expressions. In Mike's post, he said, post river swim euphoria, right? That's what he said. And it is euphoric. When you go in that cold water, you get a massive endorphin release afterwards. And it's crazy. It's like being high. It's insane. Mm-hmm. And I had a pretty neutral expression on my face, as I was talking about before. I had a neutral expression. And everyone like, oh, Andy looks happy. Andy looks happy. I'm like, how do you know what I'm experiencing? What's my internal state of being? You don't know.
Well, they're basing off of what they perceive.
What they perceive. They have no idea. And that's what I responded. And people were arguing that. They're like, nope, you're not happy. I'm like, no, I swear I'm happy. Nope, not happy. I'm like, no, really, I'm happy. I'm like feeling really good right now. Yeah. However, my facial expression didn't portray that. So I just found that interesting.
It was. Yeah. It was interesting. But, don't knock it till you try it, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Come awesome. Join us anytime.
Wim Hof is gaining a lot of popularity. And if you haven't heard of Wim Hof, he's the Iceman. And this is kind of... Well, the funny thing is he's not necessarily an inspiration because we've been doing it before Wim Hof. Or before Wim Hof became popular. We've been going in cold water for a long time.
It's been 4 years. I actually went back into the old group. We have a group called COWS, Cold Water Swimmers. And I actually went back to one of our first entries, and it was in 2012. So it's almost 4 years now.
Yeah, so we've been doing that for a while. And even as children, we were going into cold water. I mean, it wasn't like that. We were going into Georgian Bay, swimming around. And we'd be out there for hours in 60-degree water. And it was cold. However, it was not that bad. It feels good. It feels good. And now we're kind of doing the cold water swimming. And Wim Hof kind of came on the scene. Oh, well, around the time is when we started going back into the water. And he had like an A&E special or something like that where he was showcasing his talents of how he can climb Everest in nothing but a pair of shorts, and he can go into cold water for extreme amounts of time. He swims under the ice. Like he has I think maybe not a record anymore, but he can go, he'll drill a hole in the ice and swim underwater really far distances. And then he does all this crazy breath work and stuff on top of it. So we were before Wim Hof. We've been swimming in cold water way before him. So
Well, before he was popularized.
Right.
He's been doing it for like 30 years. So
yeah, exactly.
I think we're before him.
So basically what I'm saying is we're better than him.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
enough of my ego blurting out all over the internet. So want to get into like what we're talking about today?
Almost. We got one more plug to make with Omega YouTube channel, OMEGA Point. Omega Point YouTube channel is Omed's YouTube channel. Check it out. And also for floating, floathouse.ca is our website. And if you want to float, you can use the promo code VEGAN and save 20% off a single float, which is kind of connected to our guest today. So vegan for 20% off a single float. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast or any podcast, please give us a rating and a review on iTunes and maybe share it with your friends.
Oh, and
we
also
appreciate it.
Yeah, we got to shout out one man. You know who that is?
Who?
Brian Rose.
Right,
London
Brian
Reel
Rose
and the London Reel Academy. We're finally connected with you guys, and we're stoked. So if you have any feedback on this episode, please, let us know. Hit me up. You got access to me on Facebook, social media. I'm right there for you, and we want to hear it. So also, if you're looking to help us out, give us a review and rating, and that would really be helpful.
Cool. Much love to the London Reel Academy and the London Reel community. And moving into today's guest, a return guest. Super excited he came back. He's only in town for a little bit of time, and we connected before you were heading home, back to Canada, that is. And I was like, we got to get you back on, because actually your episode was one of our most popular episodes that we've had. And today we have rejoining us is Ryan Hill. I call you a permaculture specialist. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
Powerful Ryan Hill. And you've been working.
Trying to shake the table too much.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
you've been working the past almost like a year or so, pretty long. How many months you've been in India for now?
6 months exactly.
Cool.
But previous to that, I was in Australia running the Permaculture Research Institute there.
Excellent. Yeah. So the Permaculture Research Australia Institute is permaculturenews.org is the website. And you have a mentor there. You said Jeff Launton is a guy you've been working really closely with.
Yeah.
But first of all, just welcome back, man. So awesome
Thanks for having me back here. I'm super excited and was super happy to hear that it's one of the previous podcasts is one of the most listened to. That really means a lot and shows your audience is really thinking forward. So.
Absolutely. That's a good point, man. Our audience is very progressive, very forward thinking. They want to see the change in the world that we need to have so that we can have a world in the future potentially,
if
that's even, that's the boldness that we're almost getting to in this day and age. And permaculture is one of those. So why don't we we'll kind of do a little recap, because we did our last podcast with you was all about what is permaculture. And maybe you can kind of, for someone that didn't catch that episode, summarize it, and then we can kind of get into the project and work you're doing out in India.
For sure. That'd be great. So, just as a basic starting point for permaculture, it's a design science or a design ideology. It's based around 3 ethics, which are care of the earth, care of people, and the return of surplus to the first 2 ethics. So it was developed in Australia by a guy named Bill Mollison, and it really was developed out of necessity. In Australia, they have the greatest amount of land degradation, so they've cut down as far as like percentage of land mass, they've cut down the most. They have the driest climate over the longest period of time. It's pretty harsh environment in general. So this guy Bill Mollison created this design ideology or science, however you want to relate to it. And it looks at structuring our existence around the basics of what we need. We all need clean food, clean water, clean air. We need an environment that's resilient and able to deal with changes. As we move forward, we're seeing more and more of the climatic instability, I guess we can call it, these changes that we're, sort of seeing around the world. Seasons being pushed back or forward, the amount of rainfall that's changing. So all of these things we take into consideration, and we look at mitigating them and actually putting them to use so that we benefit the environment instead of degrading it like agriculture currently does. And so permaculture is pretty synonymous with agriculture, although it does go, a little bit beyond that. It goes into sort of social design and community and waste management and a few other things.
Right. That's actually, I was going to kind of get into that point, which you just covered, is that, yeah, mostly when I think of permaculture, I'm thinking about like farming and agriculture. But really, like you were saying, it's a design science.
Right.
So it's a whole system, a different kind of paradigm of looking at how to interact with the environment on all levels of human interaction and activity in societies.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So we really try to enable nature to do the hard work for us. It's funny. Most of my family doesn't really understand what I do, so they call me a farmer. And
Nice.
I get a good chuckle out of it. But I tell them like, okay, call me a farmer, but make sure you get it right. I'm a lazy farmer. Damn right. I am
Nice.
super lazy. I want to do the least amount of work possible.
Cool.
And so that's how we sort of integrate the design system. Is how do we get the most function out of the least amount of interaction? Overlap that kind of so that we get it from as many areas as possible.
That's very much that kind of Eastern philosophy too, of like, be like water, go with the flow. Like let nature do the work and just kind of observe how it works and almost, I don't want to say capitalize off that, but just work with it basically. And because actually I was listening to an Alan Watts lecture just before I got here on the treadmill, and he was talking how like the Western relationship with nature stemmed from like the Hebrew kind of relationship of how God created nature, and it's very mechanistic. That nature is just a mechanism, It's like and where there's other paradigms on how nature operates, like in India, they see it as more of a obviously, I can't remember what they said, but one of them was either India or China were saying how it's like an organism, which it really truly is like an organism. Even the inorganic elements of nature are still very, the patterns are kind of
They're
similar.
part of that whole system, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's integrated from every level in every which way, shape, and form. And, we very much are a part of nature. We just happen to have evolved in a different way with the brain and the neocortex that we have, which is wonderful, but it's also given us the abilities to make some pretty big changes in the natural patterns. So
right.
Look, right now, the way I kind of look at permaculture is this is just the next advancement in land management. How are we going to feed ourselves? How are we going to take care of the land? And, I guess that's kind of like the biggest way I can, or one of the clearest ways I can describe it is we talk about California being in this big drought, right? Years and years long. Well, they don't actually have a drought problem because they actually have enough water that falls annually. What they have is a drainage problem. What we do currently is we have all these roadways and we have cityscapes and rooftops, all these hard surfaces that collect a huge amount of water really fast. We funnel it into drainage systems and get it out to the ocean or the rivers as fast as possible, and letting it, instead of letting it soak back into the ground. And that is like a mechanistic problem as well, because as the landscape dehydrates, it loses its capacity to hold moisture too. So it kind of compounds on itself in a way.
Man, we are just
yeah.
We're just messing up.
No, we're just learning the hard way.
We are learning the hard way.
Exactly. And this is actually, had you asked me a couple of years ago what my position was on, we'll try to stay away from the super controversial Monsanto and these companies. But the way we've gone about existing and working with food and, what's happening is that these companies, as bad as they have taught us some amazing lessons, things that we would have otherwise not learned. And so we can utilize that. And that's part of the luxury of having the mindset of, okay, one man's problem is another man's solution kind of, line of thinking. And we really have learned a ton from this. And we really have, just from like the nutritional advancement, I don't think that we would know as much as we do today about nutrition if it wasn't for the lack of nutrition that exists in the food that we get from these companies. So, in the permaculture community, there's a really big hate on for these big companies that work in the ways that they do. But again, that ties back to the consumer, right? I mean, if the consumer is willing to buy it, they're going to capitalize off it. So let's just change our ways of, what we want to buy.
And exactly, too. I think you hit on something really important there. And I'm going to talk about just the idea of like even forgiveness for ourselves as human beings, and that we're all actually just learning still. And, so we have these big corporations that are out of control. Okay, so that's what's happening right now. However, those companies have taught us so much because of the mistakes they've made. And if we didn't go there, we wouldn't know it, right? So that's the whole thing about like these good and bad things that we label good and bad. You know, for example, if you have somebody who's really negative in your life and they're always this negative person, well, you can learn a lot from that person. A lot about how you don't want to be, a lot about how they come across. Maybe you see some of yourself in that person, and that's you know,
how they trigger you,
how they trigger me. Why am I being triggered by that? So to sit there and be like, oh, we got to get these big corporations. Well, you know, I don't know, because these big corporations are a catalyst to allow things like permaculture to take hold. You know, and it's really interesting how you started getting into the mechanisms and even just like home scenarios. Like we have a mutual friend, Joe, who I introduced you to a little while ago, and she's really interested, I think, in the home kind of applications for this.
Right.
And she's going out and speaking to people, and she's giving them initial assessments, and the people are really kind of surprised when she says things like, "Well, we're going to have to get rid of your lawn," and she said it doesn't go over very well.
Yeah, I've been right there alongside her for that one before. Oh man, yeah. You know, it's funny actually. The lawn really it comes from India. The initial lawn was managed by, I think it was 17 women. It was about 1 acre, and they used to cut it every day with a pair of scissors at the Taj Mahal. And when the British went there, they saw this as a hierarchical thing and adapted it, and that's where it comes from.
Crazy,
but what they kind of missed when they took that is if you go to the Taj Mahal, and I mean, you've been there, Mike, so I mean, you can see it's all farmland around it, right?
Yes.
Everything is agriculture. And, you know, whether it's good or bad or neutral in any way, shape, or form, they took that as one piece and not the entire thing. Like, we all need to have this big front lawn. And, you know, it's, had you asked me, again, you know, as we continue to evolve and, you know, actually, I'll just say briefly on the topic of Alan Watts is the contrast, black versus white. His topic of that is really where I started to actually be able to pull the idea of looking at some of the issues and problems that we've run into, and be able to look at that and go like, okay, like what do we get to learn from this, and how do we go about looking at moving forward with it? So he was a big, you know, he's one of the greatest teachers of my life, even though we've never would have had the luxury to meet the person. But
agreed. I have a whole series of his lectures that I continuously go through. Even ones I've heard, 10 times, I'll re-listen to them because they're good reminders, and you can always pull out different nuggets. Like the way he speaks is so poetic with it. But you're right, like he does identify these different forces of positive and negative. And if people can understand that concept, then when they see that, once we start to learn that something is having a negative result potentially, like the way the old way of farming is not a sustainable way, then we need to get everyone thinking of like, okay, let's recognize that problem, but now let's be a little bit more urgent with our transitioning into the ways that we've learned to be better. That's where I'd like to see some change happen, maybe a little quicker, seeing people being more proactive with that. Because I think these big companies, they have the resources to do it.
Yeah,
they do have the resources to do it. You know what I mean?
And it's an inevitability now where we're at the point of, the consumer markets, the way they work, people are actually starting to ask for and demand organic food. And this is where it gets really exciting, is organic food is just the tip of the iceberg. When you start to look at the food that comes out of an aged permaculture system, and you start testing nutrient profiles and the mineral profiles of the food, and then the counter effects of how that affects the regional landscape and the landscape hydration and the neighbor's property and everything downstream, it gets wild.
So not only is that food super nutritious for you, but it's actually like got, let's put air quotes, good karma around it as well.
For sure.
And that you're going to eat that thing like this is the best food that we can grow, and that we can create and consume for ourselves and for the earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's something there.
For sure.
I personally, I can't say I've ever had a permaculture anything. I probably maybe have unknowingly, but...
No, you probably haven't.
Have
actually.
You?
I mean, I lived at one of the oldest permaculture sites in Australia, so I was kind of in permaculture heaven there as far as food. I mean, I'd walk around and eat guavas all day and try not to do any work, but that's...
lazy farmer.
Exactly, the lazy farmer. Everything's already done.
Anecdotally though, is that food, does it taste different?
Absolutely. So I'll give a quick breakdown of how plants actually make the sweetness of food and why organic food is typically more flavorful. So what happens is we're taught in biology in high school or whatever that plants create energy from the sun through photosynthesis, and then that's how they grow. What we're not taught is the relationship between soil and the plants. And so we in permaculture talk about we don't grow plants, we grow soil. Plants are a byproduct of our good soil. So what's happening is the soil is a living medium. It's full of bacteria and fungi and microorganisms of all different ranges and sizes. And they're all in competition to survive and thrive. So their life cycle is very quick. And what happens is the plants that live in that soil, they pump what are called exudates, it's basically just sugar, into the ground. And that sugar is what they've created from the photosynthetic process. And so as they pump that sugar into the ground, they're attracting the microbes into their root system. It's called the rhizosphere. And the life cycle being so fast of the microorganisms, as they live and die and they're consumed by their sort of predators, prey relationships, that's what the plants actually eat. So plants are a lot smarter than we give them credit for because they're essentially hunters, but they're like bait hunters. They're like fishermen in a way. They throw out some food, they wait for the food to come to them, right? Or they throw out some bait and they wait for the food to come to them. And so what happens is the plants, as they are continually stressed in poor quality soil or full of chemicals, those microorganisms that are needed for that plant to grow aren't there. So it's always pumping those carbohydrates into the ground, those exudates. And that has the relationship with the sweetness of the food because the less stress and the less work that plant has to do, the more available sugars it has to put into the actual, the apples on the tree or the pears or the carrots in the ground, whatever it is. So that's why we get, if you eat a carrot that comes from an organic farm versus store-bought, one of those little tiny bleached orange ones.
Are they actually bleached?
Yeah, don't ever eat those tiny little orange
really?
carrots. Yeah, they soak them in bleach to stabilize the color. Yeah.
Oh God.
Most of them, not all of them, I'm sure.
Well, if they say organic, are they soaked in bleach?
Yeah, you can soak them in bleach if they're organic. Wow. Depending on where you are in the world.
So that's the problem with the organic. Like you said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And even though something's labeled organic, that's actually a very, that's a very finite definition that
what about in Canada,
has some
though?
benefits, but it's not like doesn't mean it's God sent by any means, really.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I thought because I was under the impression that organic stamp actually had some weight behind it.
It has a little bit.
It does. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like if you can afford to buy organic, 100%. But don't think that organic food is necessarily that much better for you. I do a lot of nutrient density testing on crops from all over the place. We just need to be able to assess, the quality of work that we're doing, right?
So when it comes down to organic food, would that be more of a lack of not using pesticides and that kind of thing? So you're going to avoid some of those potentially harmful chemicals,
right?
However, you might not be getting the nutrient density that you think you're getting.
Exactly. So if on an organic farm that was previously a non-organic farm, if you don't replace the microorganisms, then they won't be there for the plants. And so plants need, a range of about 42 essential elements for a plant to sort of thrive. Well, they only get those if they have the microorganisms that are there. So there's something like 50 million species of bacteria, 50 million species of fungi.
Different species.
Wow. We've only identified about 6,000, but when they do, what's the type of testing? They do, it's like spot testing, and they can get a generalization of the numbers that exist. It's just new. Again, this is the forefront of science and technology for food production. That's super cool. Sort of the way we look at it. And there's a woman named Elaine Ingham in Oregon, California. She's just transitioning right now. And she's sort of the world's foremost authority on microorganisms for your soil, for agriculture. And what we have the capacity to do now as far as land remediation is amazing. We can clean up a lot of toxins out of the soil. We can rehydrate landscapes, stabilize banks, you name it. It's really possible with nature.
Well, sorry, you got something to say.
I was going to say something, and that just along the lines of, can you use science to get these bacteria growth levels are back in play? Can we start pumping sugars into the ground, attract that bacteria for the trees, and then have that healthy soil bacteria going? And is there a way to kind of integrate, what we do already with what's going on to get that soil healthy again?
Absolutely. And I can do it in about 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
What?
That's how fast we can do it now. So we're right on the cutting edge. So we make something called compost tea and extracts. And so if you think of a compost, we think of compost, you take your food scraps, you throw them out in the yard in the big black bin and it goes soggy and stinks. That's not really a compost. I would call that a waste pile more than I would call it a compost.
I can't grow my food out of that?
I wouldn't prefer it. It's going to be better than buying it at the grocery store if you're shopping at any of the conventional places, but I wouldn't be too thrilled about it in general. So compost is really a complex process, and we're starting to understand it really well. So we actually make what's called a thermophilic compost. It's a heat compost. So it gets really hot, and it's from the stimulants or from the stimuli that is the microorganism activity. So we make a really specific I won't call it a recipe because it's not exactly a recipe, but we have a range of elements that we put into this compost, and it gets hot. And what's happening is that the microorganisms breed on scale. And then what we do is we make a tea out of it. And so what we do is we put it into, we use a 1,000-liter brewer. We brew the tea for 24 hours, and then we apply it to the landscape and to the plants. So it actually acts as like a pest management strategy so that you don't have to use pesticides. So when you're in the beginning stages of going through the transition from conventional to organic, you use this compost tea, and it actually adheres to the leaf surface of the plants and prevents any of the pests from being able to outcompete the bacteria.
And this tea is a natural...
basically all we're doing is we're taking the microorganisms from that compost and we're breeding them. So we're turning hundreds of millions of microorganisms into literally trillions and then applying it back to the landscape. So when you take a degraded landscape and let's say a dehydrated, deforested area that is extremely degraded, it's got all its soil lost and you
can put like the plant kombucha on there, and then it's going to come back.
Exactly.
That's what we're just basically making plant kombucha. They're enjoying that. The soil is improving, and boom, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and it's back.
About 2.5 weeks.
Amazing. So why isn't that happening?
Again, it's new information, but there's a lot of invested interest in these big chemical companies to keep their own business in power. And it's really interesting when you see these people who have, results that you would almost think aren't possible, but it's demonstrated over and over and over again. The critics that show up at some of these conversations is amazing. Like the lobbyists that come from the chemical companies to make you sound like a lunatic is quite amazing.
I'm sure they have deep pockets too.
Oh, we're talking billions, if not more.
But when I hear you talk about this stuff, I'm like, man, I get really excited. It sounds very scientifically validated. There's no wiggle room there. How can these guys have anything to say?
It's like these environmental climate change deniers, right? Apparently there is science behind all the climate change that's going on, and yet people can make arguments up that can really
cloud it,
like muddy the waters essentially. So it makes it really difficult to know who's right, who's wrong, and who's actually giving out good information, right?
There's something actually really similar in the thought process that I've taken away from India, and that is environmental awareness is a luxury. If you are stressed out and let's say you have one tree left on your property and it's the winter and you need to cut down that tree to warm your house to keep your family alive, you're going to cut down that tree, right? So it's the same thing. These chemical companies are trying to survive. So they turn a blind eye to the idea that they're harmful in a way.
Right. And that's where Float House comes in. Because if you go float, you can deal with all your issues and realize the world is full of abundance and you're going to be all right, It's
the first thing I did when I got back.
There you go.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned India. So you've been in India for the last 6 months. You've been doing... first of all, how did that project come up, and what are you guys doing there, and what's the end goal too?
Right. Okay. So this gets really exciting. So
sweet.
You might hear me. Feel free to chime in at any point if you want clarification or anything.
No, I want you to go.
Okay.
Just
great.
go.
So
buckle up.
I was working at the Permaculture Research Institute in Australia. for a temporary time. It was only supposed to be for a month or two, and then I was supposed to go to a project in Africa, in Burkina Faso. Well, that project got put on hold, and it just so happened that as I was there was a guy named Sean Bargava who came through, and he is the son of a guy named Manoj Bargava, and he is the creator of 5 Hour Energy. Those little energy shots that you get at Safeway or 7-Eleven,
and those things actually work really well.
Yeah, I mean, they're a heck of a lot better than a Red Bull, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'll take that any day over a Red Bull.
So he and I got to chatting, and his heritage is Indian, and from one of the northern states, Uttarakhand. And Mike, you've been here to Rishikesh. This is part of where we're based, right in the foothills of the Himalayas, along the Ganga. Yeah, I mean it's
magic.
It is absolute magic. Yep. So he and I got to talking, and they were looking to do a project similar to what was happening or supposed to be happening in Burkina Faso. So he poached me from that project, which worked out really well for me because I was essentially volunteering for the Permaculture Research Institute, working for just like a living wage, just to basically cover, food and the rental for my tent platform. So
crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's luckily it's Australia, so it's nice and warm there, but yeah, I wouldn't live in a tent here right now.
Snakes and spiders and stuff, though.
Yeah, it's more the snakes.
Snakes, yeah.
The snakes.
Spiders, you can squash them.
Yeah.
Snakes
when they're 2 meters long and they can jump. And I literally mean jump. Yeah, you're on your toes a little bit.
Yeah, you got to watch out for those guys.
Cool.
So yeah, we got myself and a colleague got recommended by Jeff Lawton, who is our mentor, to go and spearhead this project in India with a group called the Hans Foundation, which is so Manoj, who has the documentary Billions and Change that we were talking about earlier, has donated basically the majority of his wealth to 2 major projects, which is Stage 2, which is an engineering firm. They're working on everything from energy to water, sanitation, you name it. They've got their kind of fingers in everything right now. And the Hans Foundation, which is an organization that does rural Indian support. And through this organization, we are right now developing demonstration sites as to the effectiveness and the utilization of permaculture for the everyday Indian.
Wow.
And so right now they have made a pledge to, by the year 2020, turn the entire state of Uttarakhand into a chemical-free organic state. So we are right at the sort of forefront of transitioning an entire state into organic agriculture. Wow. And beyond. And so we're right in the beginning stages of putting together these demonstration sites. So when I first got to India, I was based in Delhi for about 3 months. We'd done a tour through the state to sort of see the challenges and complications, and then got some time to reflect and read all the reports and all that. And then in Delhi, we designed a 2-acre site that is now actually it's the best food production system in Delhi.
Wow.
They actually have so much food that they can't eat it all because they don't have the market for it yet. So everybody in India, rich, poor, everybody wants organic food. And I think that's kind of synonymous with the rest of the world. I think there's very few people who would intentionally choose to eat chemical agriculture food versus organic or better. And so we've done this in a demonstration site, and we did it in such a period of time that they kind of didn't believe that it was possible. So what's happened is it's caught the eye of the government. And what that's done is it's got them looking at the work that we're doing as a way of moving forward, which, I mean, it's amazing. It's one of the most wonderful things I've ever heard of, because when I first got into permaculture, I'd never thought that the government would be on board with any of this stuff, because it is very, a lot of the people in permaculture are anti-establishment, anti-money, and that doesn't speak for everybody. I'm certainly not that way, but we need to, work, hand in hand.
If you're going to create real change,
exactly.
Right? You actually have to integrate what you're doing, and it does seem like India is fairly progressive. It seems like, well, in some sense.
Some senses.
Because in that sense, it seems like as a country, they're really looking, like they want to move forward. They want to improve. They want to be like I don't know, maybe a player on the world scale, whatever that means.
Yeah.
You know?
They're definitely, I think they're moving in that direction, and they have every intention to be doing that. And I don't think they're far off. If they can really sort out their labor issues, it's going to be a real game changer for them.
Well, what's the population there?
It's 1.28 billion.
Wow, that's nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like most of it's poverty.
Yeah, and that's the really interesting part is the poverty line. They classify the poverty line as making about $1.50 to $2 a day.
Wow.
And that's like, it's even in India, it's hard to survive on that, like very, very hard. So they have it scaled down to a very extreme degree, which I think they're going to change. I think that it's, as everything gets more expensive, they're really looking at, how do we move forward with this on scale. It's certainly not an easy process with that many people. You look at Canada, it's Delhi, for example, is about the size of the Lower Mainland, and it's got more than the population of Canada. So,
so crazy.
Wow.
I mean,
this is a little bit off topic from permaculture. How was your time in India? It's just being in the country.
Yeah, I love India in so many ways, and I'm so heartbroken at the same time because of some of the things that I've been exposed to. But I have,
like, can you go into some detail about those things?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being in Delhi for the period of time that I was, about 2.5 to 3 months, you really get exposed to some really harsh realities of people's day-to-day lives. And one of the things that you see a lot of the time is children begging on the street corners, and you see what you assume are mothers with their children, and they're begging for money, and you really want to help. And I mean, on the other part of that as well is like the people that you work with. We have employees that are they're Indians, they're locals, and we want to pay them more. But what happens, and this is really, really awful, is that when the community starts to catch wind that there's someone willing to pay more people move into the region, move into the area, that little suburb, whatever it is. And after the project work is done, because a lot of what we do is kind of temporary work with the amount of labor we use, when the work dries up, it actually reflects very poorly on the surrounding area, and that's when you start to see incidences of murder and rape and all kinds of things.
Well, it turns to
go up.
Yeah, we have a larger population, and now all of a sudden, no income.
Right, exactly. So everyone gets quite a bit more stressed. And then when you see things like when I first was there, or during the first couple of weeks when I was there, I would give some change to the kids on the side of the road, and I was actually told not to, because what happens is those kids are essentially leased, and they are put out on the streets, and kids are you're much more likely to give money change to a child than you are to an adult.
So it's a bit like some Slumdog Millionaire in that scene where they have children farms kind of, and they put their kids to beg, and then they bring the money back to whoever.
Yeah,
like it's controlling those kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they actually, this is really, really awful to say, but it's just part of the reality, is that they actually lease babies, newborn children.
Well, they did that in the movie too.
Yeah, and they drug them so that they're docile.
Oh.
I can't remember the name.
Oh,
they rub a substance under their gums, and it calms them down. Kind of like what they used to do with teething babies with whiskey, but
so they could be in pain. You have no idea.
Yeah, and again, like these kids, they see none of that. What I started doing was giving food, but again, they get upset when you give them food because they want the money. Yeah. Because that's what they're told to go after. So if you give them, any kind of food, they kind of scoff. And I mean, I've had bananas smashed into windows, and all kinds of weird things happen when you're trying to help, but you don't want to perpetuate something that's an ongoing challenge.
And really, that all comes down to just an example of extreme poverty and what people are willing to do in those kind of situations.
And exploitation. Yeah, based off of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I remember being there and. those different kind of dilemmas. Like when you're backpacking around, you're just this glowing light of money to them. And so they just, it's nonstop.
Yeah.
It's one of the challenging things of traveling India or living in India as a non-Indian, I guess, is that they'll just, it's relentless really. And yeah, I mean, you get those points, like you literally have what is perceived to be a mother carrying their baby. Like, I just need to get food for my baby. And you're
saying no to that. No.
Yeah, and it's
it's just like every bone. It's just like it's awful, but I mean, it's not more awful for them, obviously. But it's just it's just like, man.
Well, here's the thing: if you're on, and this is the thing that was pretty impressive. What you just said, how the Indian government actually got attention to see, that just throws me off. Let me just talk.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyways. The Indian government gave you some attention for what you guys are doing because of the surplus of food. So it shows me that they're actually looking for potential solutions.
Right. That's the thing, is I think every government is looking for a solution that's A, going to be cost effective and work for everybody, B, bring people out of poverty and sickness, and C, protect the environment. And that's kind of everything that we do. And we're starting to see that we have such a surplus of food at this property in Delhi now that the property was initially developed to feed an ashram there. But because of the amount of food that's grown, they're actually having to start to sell some of the excess. So there's a food supply system in Delhi now that's starting to take hold. That is an organic food, far beyond organic food supply chain.
That's what I want to ask you. So you've said organic, and that the state you're working in is
Uttarakhand.
Uttarakhand. Yeah. So
you say that really well. Can you say it again?
Uttarakhand.
Oh, wow. Uttarakhand. You've been there for a while.
Now, you're saying they're trying to become an organic state.
Yes.
But if it's permaculture, is it not like, are you just interchanging those two terms right now? Because I want to start saying like permaculture is different than organic. Is that?
So the way you'll hear me describe it most of the time is beyond organic.
Okay.
Or I mean, the most appropriate way to say is biologically active food.
Okay.
So
is the stuff in Delhi biologically active food?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And the goal of the state
Uttarakhand
is
we'll get that down.
I know.
We just call it UK for
UK.
For short.
Is that going to be biologically active?
Now, so the initial plan isn't to go fully biologically active food.
How come?
Just because of the amount of work it takes to go from A to B as far as education. It's a lot of work.
Gotcha.
And so we need to demonstrate how we can do the basic things to get rid of the worst part, which is the chemicals. So we need to get rid of the chemicals first, and then we can move on to the next stage.
Okay.
And so that's where we're designing probably 4 initial pilot sites that will cover the range of the separate climate ranges within that state. And so it'll be like education hubs where farmers will be able to come and learn. And the idea is actually to subsidize their lost wages, pay them to come and learn. And then we're going to train a certain amount of trainers and then have them dispersed throughout the state. Cool. So we take the 80-20 model in a lot of ways. I'm sure you guys are super familiar with that. Mm-hmm. And we try to centralize ourselves around the major hubs of people. So we're based out of Rishikesh right now. We have a village site which is at about 800 meters, which covers a big portion of the state's low-lying foothills, which covers a big chunk of the population. We also have another site that's being developed in Dehradun shortly, which is the capital city, and it's more like the plains. So that will again cover. We're looking at covering the biggest chunk of the population as we can up front.
Right.
And so we don't necessarily even teach all of the permaculture principles and practices up front, because again, this is one of the things that really sort of hit home for me was environmental awareness is really a luxury. And again, it's a luxury of the West. When you're that stressed out about just being able to survive, you don't care. I mean, you can't care. You don't have the energetic space within yourself to even care. It's just survive. So if you have to cut down a tree, or if you have to do whatever it is that you have to do to survive, you're going to do it.
Well, that's kind of the same argument that people use in North America for vegans. And they're like, I'm not knocking vegans. I'm just saying that they're like, well, the only reason you can be a vegan is because you live in North America and we have all this abundance, right? And you can be that picky with the food that you get, right? Same kind of idea there, I think.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and again, I'm not knocking vegans. I'm just saying, because there's probably some listening right now. I'm just saying that
our promo code's vegan.
I know. I'm just sorry, guys. I'm vegan. You guys are awesome. I watch Cowspiracy. I get it. But I mean, if you have a can of SpaghettiOs or nothing, you're going to eat that can of SpaghettiOs.
Yeah. Let's talk about Cowspiracy for a second.
Sure.
Okay, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a very interesting documentary, and it brings to light a lot of really important issues. What my frustration with it is that it's a vegan agendized film. So I don't, I completely appreciate it. And I think the majority of the information that comes out of there is pretty factual. There's some misses, but what they don't take into consideration is that this earth has had animals on it for a very long time, a lot longer than we've been around. And they are an integral part of how the planet stays healthy. So if you don't have animals in your landscape, so if you own a property and you don't have animals in it, you need to bring outside inputs in to keep it healthy. And so in a permaculture managed system, designed and managed system, you have animals that rotate through the system. But what happens is if you have animals, you have to eat animals because the animals are going to breed. And trust me, you cannot prevent them from breeding. It's just
I think, they went a little overkill, and probably rightfully so, simply because of how out of balance it is, right?
I agree. And the quality of food that comes out of a CAFO or whatever is, it's probably detrimental to your health more so than anything else.
Right. So and that's the one thing I did sense. I'm like, this is a very pro-vegan lifestyle film, and the problem with doing it that hard on one side, it's gonna get their point across. However, it's also gonna turn people away. For myself, I'm like, you guys are just talking your propaganda right now. It's just it throws me off because I'm like, are you really being legitimate?
Exactly, right. That's the and again, they're not being legitimate. A lot of the statistics that they have are bloated.
See, that's the problem, and many people do that to win their argument, win their cause.
Right.
Like our friend Alex was at Harvard in, I think, the 80s or 90s, whenever he was there.
Sure.
And this is not the best example to use right now, but I'm just gonna say it. So there's a big anti date rape campaign on the campus when he was there. And of course, it was orchestrated by feminists, and that's a good thing. However, when it came time to present the data, and actually their campaign was extremely successful, they actually showed that it wasn't as successful as it was, just to continue to get more leverage and power for their cause, as opposed to reporting that, yes, they were successful. Date rape went down. And they continued to, and they didn't report it properly, so they would be able to get more power, more momentum behind feminism, whatever you want to call it. So that stuff is just come on, guys. I know you're doing a good thing. However, let's be honest, because if you don't, the reaction of you kind of exaggerating doesn't make people trust you.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that really ties back into the reality of the situation that we're in right now, is that we live in a marketing world, right?
Yep.
And it kind of seems like if the better you are at marketing, the more famous you become, the more successful you become. And so it's really, it's a shame in one sense, but at the same time, if you have a good cause and you're doing good things, why not utilize that information, right?
So does the question is, does the end justify the means? In a lot of cases, it probably does. So that's why Cowspiracy ultimately is probably a good thing, because in a sense, it's a counterbalance to what's going on now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they probably miss a few things in that documentary as a whole. They don't really talk, when they start to talk about health, they don't even mention sugar. So I can't verify these statistics, but it's something like in 1800 it was about 4 pounds of sugar consumed annually in the United States. Today it's something like 150 pounds annually, and that's a lot of sugar. And that's a much bigger risk for health than any meat product is.
Well, Terrence McKenna Terrence McKenna talks about sugar all the time. He's like, sugar is like the most dangerous drug out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's more addictive than cocaine. They've been able to justify that through MRI scanning now. And, you know, I mean, its production methodology uses a heck of a lot of chemicals that pollute the ground and all that. So it's, you know.
Brian Hill, what is the answer? What do we need to do?
Nervous laughter. No,
I wish that was a much easier answer.
Yeah, well, it's tough.
I think
the cool thing is, sorry, can I go?
Yeah.
Okay. The cool thing is, there is all this awareness coming out about so many different things now, right? There's awareness about the pros and cons of the way we're living in our lifestyle today. So we're seeing that there's way better ways we can do it. You know, you got guys like you, like that. What you're doing is super innovative, and it's so fucking cool. I'm just like, wow, that's badass. And like, I put you on the level in terms of innovation as like an Elon Musk. Believe it or not, I mean, that's a pretty big standard in terms of impact and what you're doing in the world or what you could potentially change. I mean, okay, so he's trying to build electric cars, he's building batteries for homes, and he wants to go to Mars. Well, you're giving real world solutions to our food problem, which is a massive problem.
Thank you. You know, I really appreciate that, and B, you hit the nail right on the head there. I think Elon Musk is an amazing man who's doing some incredible things. He's really going to be a driving force in the transition, but we only get one home right now.
And we got a long way to go.
That is Earth, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Totally.
So right now, the biggest project of its kind in this field is a project that took place in China in the lowest plateau. It's 35,000 square kilometers. Wow. It took $500 million in World Bank funding. It took 3 years of planning before they broke ground. And in total land mass, it's 0.0026% of just China. We got some work to do. You know, like we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
There is a lot of work to do, and again, it comes back to, well, we're moving slowly into this really positive light, which is where we need to go.
Absolutely.
The question is, can we do it quick enough, right?
And that's where, Sean, the son of Manoj Bhargava, is where he comes in. He is an extremely innovative thinker, and he is action-oriented all the time. I've met very few people who move in the similar form and function as he does.
Describe the form and function.
Well, he will take ideas and he'll break them down to their most basic element and look at the functionality of it very much. I think he probably goes more like a 90-10 model than he does an 80-20 model, and just really like
hammers it home.
Yeah. I want the most effective things, and I want them done now. Who do I have to talk to make this a possibility, and where do I need to go in this direction? What's the capacity? Who's it going to help? How's it going to promote change?
I love that attitude, and I think it's amazing. And I'd like to think I'm not sure if I'm that decisive, maybe. However, so many people can't handle that. They get like almost offended because he's being so direct. Yeah. However, he's got such good intentions.
Absolutely.
You know, does he come across like that at all, or does he get his point across effectively?
That's something where he and I have exchanged conversations about in the past. Is like, okay, well, if it doesn't serve like a positive function, just drop it. Like, just, you know, it's cold sometimes to like tell somebody who has dedicated their life or a portion of their life to something that they think is really innovative and a positive thing, and it usually is. But if it doesn't serve the pace that we're trying to move at, then
I mean, you got to look at it, and like that's where that idea of non-attachment comes into, and just being okay with the fact that you're wrong, and actually that wrong is, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You actually serve people through that mistake.
Absolutely, right. And it doesn't mean that just because it doesn't get picked up by this one person, that it doesn't serve a positive function in another way that gets implemented down the road. It's just not highest possible outcome for lowest input up front. Yeah. And that's really what we're looking for. And so even with the work that we're doing, is we've had to subject ourselves to a little bit of variance as far as like the inputs that we would necessarily put in place. So we're going, what is the most basic functional thing we can do. And that, again, is microorganisms back into the soil because of the relationships that get developed there. The application of putting microorganisms back into the ground, what that does for things like landscape rehydration, plant growth, and, don't let me talk about it for too long, but
dude, just go.
Yeah, I mean, so trees offer this like really unique function, and it's a process called hydraulic redistribution. So we think of trees as like a drain on the system, right? So we think that they're taking up water, they're using that water, they pump that water back into the air, and it's a negative thing. Well, sometimes it can be, and maybe if you put a eucalyptus tree in the middle of the desert, it's probably not a good idea because it's using so much water. But the process is that water actually uses the roots of trees to penetrate deeper into the aquifer. So a tree can only take up so much water, and it's something like a tree in the Amazon rainforest can process about 250,000 liters of water a day. And that's putting water back into the ground, not just pulling it up and using it for its own, purposes and survival and to produce food, but actually getting that back into the ground to, we're pumping water out of the ground, out of these aquifers. California in some places has actually sunk about 7 feet because of the water extraction that they've gone through. They've pulled something like 60% of the groundwater out that takes thousands of years to replace. And so trees are very much in a relationship with this. And I think I might have mentioned this in the last podcast, but just because it's such an astounding or staggering factor is that, the whole Middle East, when you look through some of like Alexander the Great's diaries and stuff, dialogue like that or literature like that, you can actually see that the whole Middle East used to be forested. My colleague that I work with in India, Mohammed, he's from Morocco, and they have a song that talks about a squirrel being able to jump from limb to limb all the way from east to west Africa in northern Africa, which is essentially the Sahara Desert.
Right.
Well, it's the human interaction that has changed that. We cut down all the trees, we built things out of it, we used the timber, heated our homes, and then we brought grazing animals through and prevented all those trees from coming back. So
right.
So
you're presenting all this information, and I'm not saying this in a skeptical way, but is it all backed like scientifically?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hydraulic redistribution is something that they teach in.
I'm talking even about all the permaculture stuff that you were bringing forth, right?
Yeah.
So, and because you're saying these people are coming out to these, I don't know what you're going to call it. You're getting like lobbyist type people coming out and arguing what you guys are doing. Right. So do they have a leg to stand on, or is it just kind of?
They absolutely have a leg to stand on. We're still, because permaculture is relatively new, the science, again, because it's new science, we don't have a lot of tangible studies to outline the data, but there are enough of them to say yes. I mean, there's about 3,000 published papers that demonstrate that microorganisms affect the health of plants, and that plants can get everything they need from a soil that has.
Sorry, I wasn't saying the permaculture is having a leg to stand on. I meant like these lobbyist people that are lobbying against it's kind of nonsense.
They don't have a leg to stand on.
So yeah, that's what I meant, the opposite way. So my question is like, how do we get those people? And it kind of reminds me of I'm going to go off topic a little bit, but Graham Hancock. Mm-hmm. So he's got this really interesting theory about the course of the planet and like this information that he's gathered by talking to geologists and all the information he put into Magicians of the God, or is that what it's called? Magicians of the God, his book.
Yeah.
And his big frustration is he's presenting all this information to scientists, geologists, and it's like you said, they don't want to let go of what they've been teaching for the past 20, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And he's finding it really frustrating because he's giving this real evidence, and they don't even consider it.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like that's kind of like what's happening to you guys right now.
Very much. When there's that much money on the line, I think greed supersedes any kind of like hope for the future in that respect. Like where people are like, let's take care of me now and let someone else worry about the future.
And that is like that right there is the biggest problem.
Right.
Or one of the biggest problems.
Absolutely.
It's like the root of it.
For
right?
short, yeah. All this stuff for short-term goals,
Yeah.
you're right. That is a huge root. I wanted just to jump. Did you see that video I sent you on Facebook about
guy
these
from
guys?
Brazil?
Yeah. Have you seen that stuff before?
I have, yeah.
What was happening there? So they were talking about like building these new forests, but forests of foods with lots of different species and stuff. Is that a permaculture design application?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
So we designed something called a food forest.
Okay.
And this food forest is a combination of fruit trees and what we call support species. And so what we do is we'll plant, depending on your climate and your rainfall and a bunch of other factors, we'll plant one fruit tree and sort of between like 5 and 9 support species trees. So these support species trees are usually leguminous trees, and they grow extremely fast, and they put nitrogen back into the soil, which is sort of like the main ingredient that we like we need water, trees need nitrogen. Sort of plants need nitrogen. That's what gives them the ability to have chlorophyll inside, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do is, because they're very fast-growing trees, we can prune them and put the material that we pruned back onto the ground to be the food for the fruit trees. And so these systems, it is very much like a managerial system, are some of the most productive in nature. So a forest, again, has the highest range of biodiversity. It's got the most stability. It actually influences its own climate to a large degree. They are just the most stable environments that we have. Cool. And so we mimic what nature does, and biodiversity is nature's game. That's the 1-2 punch of nature, is biodiversity.
Right.
And we try to mimic that as much as possible. So now we might waver a little bit and say, like, okay, we might focus on food production, but we focus on food production in an area that's conducive, that we can now utilize it as close to the house as possible, or close to the home, or the farm, the accessibility as possible. And we try to leave it alone as much as possible at the same time. So when we talk about like a permaculture design, is we're going to put the elements that need the most attention as close to our home as possible. We're going to put the elements that need the second most attention. It's a process of zoning, and we go through this process. So in like what they're doing in Brazil there, those food forests, they kind of end up in like your zone, like 3, zone 4. So they're further away. They don't, they're not like super, like a very high level of interaction with them.
Right.
So you can let nature kind of take due process, and you're not going to interact with it too much.
You just kind of come get the yields.
Right, exactly. But your vegetable garden, you have like right outside of your door, right? So something we call like our kitchen garden. This is one of the things we're implementing in India, is that we want to have a garden as close to the house as possible, because that is where your nutrition comes from. So let's keep that nutrition on hand all the time. We don't want to be without that.
Right.
And so what they're doing in Brazil with that, I think it's 12 or 1,400 acres, something like that.
Yeah.
A huge project. Yeah, it's really amazing. But there's kind of a funny phenomena going on in the permaculture world right now, because there's been like this big pushback from anti-establishment. There are people that understand that that's probably not the most effective way to make change and have this level of interaction. So they're changing, and we're kind of going towards, or there's the term regenerative agriculture evolving out of this. And so that's kind of, regenerative agriculture to me is very much permaculture. It just doesn't have the social aspect to it, right?
Gotcha.
So permaculture kind of more extremists in a way.
Well, that, and also the social part, like you said.
Right. Yeah. So if you want
establishment,
those people, they want to go live in the woods and have off-grid homes and all of that, which is fine. Like, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that. I want to have an off-grid cabin in the woods here for sure. Get me one in Garibaldi Park or something. I'd be real happy.
Awesome.
But
yeah,
I'm gonna let your imagination run wild for a second. Okay, so let's say we could just get like a big kind of vacuum cleaner and just suck all the human beings off the planet. Okay, how quickly would the planet restore itself to a healthy place? And is that even possible? And I mean, that's so abstract. How could you ever predict something like that?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm just saying, like, if we kind of eliminated that big imbalance, in theory, would the planet regenerate?
It would. It's just whether would it. I mean, what we consider habitable is based on human needs, right? So if we take habitability based on what humans need, it would for sure. The predator-prey balances would come back. I think it would happen a lot sooner than we think it would. A lot faster,
20 years?
couple 100 years.
100 years?
before,
20 years, not 20 years.
Definitely not 20 years. No,
No, okay.
I think a couple hundred years probably.
Yeah.
Where it would really start to sort of balance itself out. But again, like, you know, it's really difficult to say because there's so many factors when it comes to the climate that if we've made a shift. So what we see right now in the Himalayas is that we actually have to mitigate the rainfall because it's intensified. So they used to get during the monsoon season, sort of like 2.5 months of like a consistent misty rain, like we used to get here, but they get it in the summer growth season. So it's like rampancy. So it's like the tropics. But, you know, let's just say that the environment isn't going to get worse if we left. Yeah.
Although it could be a point of no return kind of thing too. Right. So the other question, I had a good question. It was another good one. It was like, it's going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. So keep going. It'll come back in 2 seconds.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So if you left me with about 100,000 people willing to work, or, you know, if you left all the permaculturalists, it would recover pretty quick.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah,
it's we're getting kind of to the point now where we're about to be able to put technology to work for us really, really well with some of the new mapping software that exists to really like design landscape fast and putting GPS guided machines on the ground, like a road. If I could get a GPS guided road grader.
Well, I think I know what your question was.
Okay.
Are there any drone applications?
I remember. No, that wasn't it.
Are you sure?
Oh, that's a damn good question.
Any drone applications?
There's a lot of drone
Oh
applications.
yeah, drones are the answer. People
There you
don't
go.
hate
And
on the
drone.
drones. Okay,
I just bought one of the. You
got a drone?
Oh, you got a drone.
DJI
Phantom 3
Pro.
Professional.
Yeah, Phantom 3 Professional. Yeah,
I have
the
the same
4K
one.
camera.
It's badass.
Those things.
Yeah, you got to be careful where you fly those things. That's all I'm going to say about that.
And check your local municipal allowance
regulatories.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I was going to go, this is kind of so.
We'll come back
stories.
to drones.
Drones is hot. They're so hot right now, and a lot of people hate on them. But that's because you're afraid. It's new technology. You're afraid of things, and you're just afraid in general. So that's your problem, not mine. Okay. Okay. I was told stories back in the day on back in the Caymans, where the sailors would come there when they first started. The European sailors would come to the Cayman Islands. That there would be so many turtles in the sea that they would pick up sea turtles and they would eat them. Right. You could scoop them up. There was like sea bass that were the size of cars. Like you hear these stories, right? I'd love to go back to a time when the earth was like this pure and just like see that, like that abundance of nature. Like imagine going up to like the Grand Banks in like Nova Scotia and just seeing like you could like scoop fish out of the ocean and there's thousands and thousands, millions of them everywhere. And just life is thriving on the planet. You know, how cool would that be to see?
Go to an established permaculture farm. It's not far off.
Wow.
It's that thriving.
Literally you can't walk more than 10 steps without there's being something to eat.
Wow.
It's that abundant. Whether it's your ponds, like so Zaytuna Farm, which is the research institute in Australia, there's 16 ponds. They're full of fish or eels or snails, or I don't know that you want to eat snails necessarily, but
escargot, man.
Yeah, man,
it's French all about it.
Delicious,
good protein.
Yeah. There's chickens all over the place. There's eggs everywhere. There's wild animals that you can eat. There's the ponds being full of fish, but there's thousands of fruit trees that ripen at all different types of the year. I think there's like a 2-week period where there's not anything like in heavy abundance.
And then when that happens, you go and you do a fast.
Yeah, do a water cleanse.
do a fast, or you
seasonal.
Move into the paleo side of things for a little while.
Yeah,
and there's always your kitchen garden that's always
it's always fruiting.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're in Vancouver, or the unceded Coast Salish territories.
We should have said that at the beginning.
Is also known as Vancouver. What do you see? Maybe how could permaculture maybe kind of seep into Joe, mutual friend, is looking at how to apply this here. Where do you see, maybe people here in communities and neighborhoods kind of getting into a permaculture design mentality?
Well, I think Joe's got the right idea, trying to get people rid of their lawns. It's just a waste of space. Nobody uses them anymore. When's the last time you walked through the suburbs and you saw kids playing on their lawn? Most of the time they just spray with chemicals and there's a sign that says keep off the lawn, right?
Yeah.
There's a guy in Kelowna named Curtis Stone who actually leases people's yards and does food production off of it. Really,
awesome.
really
That's
cool
a cool
stuff.
idea.
He's called the Urban Farmer.
Yeah.
He makes about $75,000 off a third of an acre. He works 5 months a year or 7 months a year. He's got a really smart setup.
That's neat. That could go North Van for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I fantasized about getting 40 acres in North Van and just letting the city municipality let me do what I want to do with it.
Avoid the city municipality and go to the First Nations people,
right?
Because they were much more willing to play ball.
Absolutely,
if you have the money.
Yeah, if you have the money. But North Van's not cheap right now, so
exactly. Well, their land is potentially.
Potentially, if you're doing the right things and you're supporting the community, which permaculture very much does.
Yeah.
Right. As a whole, that's very much part of the whole basis. But I think that we're starting to see like this year and next year, man. You watch and you see there's already been 1.2 million acres of land taken out of production in California, in the most productive, fertile place that the United States has. So that reflects very heavily on us because we get something like 65% of our food from California or Mexico. And as we start to see some of the troubles that they run into with water accessibility, the cost of food, the cost of production, I mean, go to Whole Foods, man. It's not cheap to eat healthy. I'll tell you that.
Cold pressed juice, man. Yeah. Organic cold pressed juice. You're paying $10 for a bottle.
That's crazy. I mean, I buy it because it's worth it.
It's delicious and it's healthy. And
exactly. But I also grow my own food as much as possible anywhere that I am. Typically, if I'm going to be somewhere for more than 3 months, the first thing I do before I even look around the neighborhood is plant some kind of a garden.
Cool.
And that's because there's another component when it relates to health that comes from the permaculture side, or just growing your own food side of things, is that there's 2 enzymes that are only active in your body if you eat food that is less than about 2 hours from being picked. Whoa. So you cannot get them in any other way.
So you got to pick it and eat it.
Exactly. I typically every morning I try to go for a walk through a garden if I'm around one and just eat a couple of things. Doesn't have to be, anything much, but, if you can eat a couple of things, especially if you trust it being unwashed because it's got all the good microorganisms on it, that's where we get our natural microbiome from, is the soil. The soil is so much the source of everything.
This is something
we are here for.
That's been really interesting for me, or this topic, and I don't know that much about it, obviously. Probably you know a lot more than I do. How much does our gut, flora and fauna, play a role with our overall health as humans?
More than we even know. We're starting to learn different things about enzymes and the capacity that it has on hormone production in the body that we didn't even think there was a relationship with. And so they're saying that we're more bacteria than we are human cells. They kind of messed up with that one a little bit.
I didn't hear that one. However, I did hear that your gut bacteria has a lot to do with serotonin production and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's real?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, the gut really enables assimilation of nutrients. So if your gut is in an imbalance with the right types of microorganisms, you're not going to be able to make certain minerals available to your body. So let's just take selenium, for example. Really, really hard to get. If you're eating Brazil nuts, you can get it. But if you're missing a specific range of bacteria in your gut to actually make it assimilatable to the body, you're not going to be able to get it regardless, right? And so this is what's happening with the standard North American diet now is that they still recommend a huge amount of sugar and refined carbohydrates, and the whole gluten intolerance topic is it's a really big issue, and I think that it's absolutely true. There are those who say gluten's natural, and it is, but what we did to the wheat, which is where gluten comes from, is we hybridized it, right? So we took this one piece of wheat from over here and we bred it with this other one to get a bigger annual yield. And so what happened was, from about 1910 to current times, we have changed the average gluten content of wheat from somewhere around 2 to 5%, depending on the variety, to over 50.
Whoa! So gluten is way up. Now I heard gluten's only an issue if you are celiac.
No, not true.
No?
Gluten causes inflammation in the body. Gluten can affect leaky gut syndrome in a large way. Gluten is a food for candida.
So would you say most people should avoid gluten then?
that's my personal opinion. I'm not gluten intolerant. I've been tested for it, but I find when I don't eat gluten, I'm just a more functional person. I have less brain fog in the mornings. I have my stomach. I have less of a stomach bulge if I ever get that from eating. If I go and eat some bread and a sandwich or whatever. I do get like that bloated stomach a little bit, but when I cut out gluten and I'm really strict about it, I totally notice a difference.
Okay, cool,
very cool.
Yeah, and when going back to that whole thing, man, I mean, like going back to that ideal world. The thing is, we have to integrate. We can't go all extremist and be like, no government. Well, we need a government. Someone's got to manage this crazy thing we call society, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
However, you got these guys like Elon Musk who are doing all these amazing, innovative things. And I put you in that category, like not in any like I don't know, sarcastic kind of way. Like I really believe that that kind of work is really important. Having the best possible food supply. How many potential issues can we solve, like health issues with human beings can we solve with that? Who knows?
Addiction alone, I think, is
so
a big
much
part of that.
Right? And it's so interesting to see these little seeds of like light. And it's just like, well, we got Elon, we got the permaculturists doing all this great stuff, right? And it's really neat to see it. And now, can we do it quick enough, right?
Right. That's what we're trying to do in India right now is just get those basics in place to demonstrate that, yes, we can. And it is possible. Give me Elon Musk's financial capital. I'll show you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, man. Like,
so what you need that
big bankroll first. You need the bankroll.
Yeah.
Because then you can just. I mean, that's the nice thing with your partner that you're kind of working with. It seems like, when you get that much money and that many resources, you can kind of. You can just work at that 90-10 level because there's like no boom, boom, and then what do we need to make it happen? Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
It's just like instantaneous. Like you kind of can accelerate your whole process because you have these resources right at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's I got to say it's an absolute luxury to be able to work in that scenario where we are moving. As fast as we can. And, it's interesting because I still feel like I'm like a hyper self-critical person. So I'm always thinking I can do more.
You're doing a pretty good thing. Maybe you can let yourself acknowledge that a little bit and be like,
I'm trying to be self-accepting.
You're pretty, in terms of the whole I'm doing good for the world idea, you're pretty high up there. So.
Thanks. I don't know, maybe it goes, sort of unrecognized internally because I've started to hear that a little bit from bits and pieces, but it just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it hasn't started to fully register in here yet. So
well, you got to check in with that.
I'll do a little more self-acceptance on that.
Yeah, let that happen because this is incredible work. It's very exciting, like just hearing you talk from the details of it and the science behind it all, and then the applications. It's really cool to see where it could all go and how viable it really truly is. You know what I mean?
And that's the really interesting part about it is that, with the just from a financial model, that organic food is worth more. When you can start to put that into the hands of people that actually see the tangible results, and it's cheaper to do, and it's kind of easier in the long run. It's
win-win.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost the ultimate win-win.
Right.
You get to make more money. You take people out of poverty. You're bringing people's health and nutrition back into place. It's really great.
Yeah, that's why it still boggles me when you don't see like a big corporation seeing all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I want to invest.
The funny thing is, they have this machine that's working and bringing them a lot of income, a very healthy, stable, lifestyle, whatever there is. They're accustomed to that, and they don't want to let go.
But innovation, big companies are innovative all the time. That's what I don't understand. Like they can take let's take $50 million and let's do a test project, but like a really good test project, and see so we can get the data we need so that we can make the because once you get that example, you can literally calculate the whole thing out. Okay, well, let's invest $2 billion into the next one, and we know we should be able to produce this.
Well, you can scale it.
It's all calculable.
Scalable. Yeah.
Calculable.
I guess, and maybe that's also part of the work that we're doing is because we're starting to put relatable, tangible data in the hands of people who are looking at it. But it takes time to get that tangible data too. I'm years away from being able to say like, okay, here's your average per acre cost to do a revamp of the entire area with the initial infrastructure that's already in place. So it takes time, and you have to be with any new innovative technology. And, I very much think that even though permaculture is based in like the natural sciences and just letting nature take due course, it very much is like structurally new in its conceptual idea of how it's going to work and integrate and be relatable with people and how we can all be fed in this way. So it is new ideas and people, again, I mean, it's interesting because I'm 30 years old and I'm talking to people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s sometimes who work within the government. And you can just see the glazed over look like, okay, this
why should I listen to you, young man?
Who are you?
You hippie, right? Look at that hair.
Exactly.
Look at a haircut. Where's your suit?
You probably like Bitcoin too, don't you? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean.
But it is changing,
Totally.
And I think I said something last time when I was here that I'm really hopeful. I was very hopeful. I think now I'm even more hopeful.
Sweet.
Yeah, which is
growing.
Yeah, it is. It is growing, and more people. I think people are just more willing to adhere to like what is going on.
I think so. I think with the internet is key. It's like freedom of information for now. Hopefully that continues. Yeah. I mean, like there's so many people out there that are just like there's some kind of disconnect with the world, with humanity. Something is off, and that's kind of on a lot of people's radar right now. And there's more and more people talking about solutions to different problems all the time. So I think I'm optimistic. I think human beings are pretty adaptable, survivable creatures, and if it comes down to survival, I think we're going to find a way to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm certainly not technologically adverse, but I think we're about to sort of break this threshold where it's financially feasible to utilize technology in this industry, and that we're going to be able to get governments on board because it's just
it's food.
It's food. It's and it's a system of management that protects the entire planet, which it's pretty clear we all need it still.
100%.
Until Elon gets a few stages into the future here,
yeah.
we're pretty dependent
Elon,
on it.
Pick it up, man. We're not at Mars yet.
Yeah.
What's going on with that slacker?
It's funny. I was watching the movie The Martian, and I had this odd fantasy of actually going to Mars to sort of colonize it the way Matt Damon did.
Yeah, okay, I haven't seen that one.
I heard it's that good.
Sorry, spoiler.
Well, no, I'm going to go see it. Anyways,
it's been up for a while.
Do you know Elon Musk by chance?
I don't know Elon Musk.
Elon, if you're listening to Vancouver Real right now, or if anyone out there who's listening to Vancouver Real knows Elon, tell him we want him on the podcast.
Absolutely.
No, I'm not. I'm serious.
I'll
Do you know
cancel
him?
my yoga class tomorrow.
I will. Yeah, I will cancel a float for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As crazy as that sounds, I will
invite him.
Elon.
For a float.
Elon, come in for a float. All right, you can see the float tank.
And get a good idea, probably.
Yeah, you'll probably generate some
probably
kind of
floats.
Probably.
Well,
secret weapon.
Let's wrap this up, man. This was incredible. Thank you. Round 2 was even better than round 1, and I'm pumped to publish this one. So. Ryan Hill's on Facebook, so connect with this young lad and pick his brain, and just also follow the projects. You said you got cool photos on there of what you're doing in India right now.
Yeah. So you can check out my Facebook profile.
Cool.
We've got lots of photos of the project up there as to what we're allowed to show at this point, and there should be a fairly substantial unveiling in about a year. I know that's a long way away for people to.
It'll go quick.
Oh man, I'm there. I'm like year. That's short game.
It's only 365 chai teas in the morning.
Exactly, right.
That's all it is.
Break it down like that.
And if anyone's in India and they want to come by and see the work themselves firsthand, we're always open to that if we're around. And just shoot me a message on Facebook.
Very cool.
Yep.
There you go.
Awesome.
So Ryan Hill, that's HILLRYAN. And more information about permaculture, the Permaculture Research Australia, which is permaculturenews.org. And also jefflawton.com is your mentor. You mentioned him, and his website is GEOFFLAWTON.com. So Jeff Lawton. We'll have all these links up. Man, Ryan, thank you so much again, man. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun.
Guys, thanks for offering this platform. I'm really real happy to be here and share what I have, but also, just the community you guys put forward and floating in general. That was next to food, it was the first thing I did when I got back, and it totally cracks my jet lag.
Yeah.
If I come and float, take a little bit of melatonin before I go to bed. 100% the next day, you know?
Amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And if you guys like what you're hearing today, help us out. Give us a review or rating on iTunes. That's huge. Share it around. Tell your friends. Tell your family, you know, tell your dog.
By you sharing this episode, you will help save the world.
Ooh,
absolutely.
It's true, actually.
So, you know, that's all it
point.
takes. Like, comment, share, boom. Help save the world. That's the power of the internet. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And until next time.
To whatever is.
To whatever is.